Welcome to Through the Forest. Each week we're going to review a section of Scripture to determine what the Word says about how we can be better parents. Let's get started with the weekly Word with our hosts, Jeff and Brett. Well, hello, welcome to Through the Forest. We're going to have a much shorter episode here today. Holiday weekend kind of altered our recording schedule a bit, so this is going to be a much shorter episode because it's just me. It's much easier to discuss when Brett and I are conversing, and I don't really want this to be a lecture or sermon, so we're going to just keep it short. And it's actually a really good text for a shorter episode since we're only focusing on a few verses. We're going to be finishing out 2 Timothy chapter 1 this week, and we're going to be on verses 15 through 18. And these verses are really kind of in my mind, just a simple contrast between those who are opposing him. He mentions them, Phygelus and Hermogenes, and Onesiphorus, who was welcoming to him. And in terms of family context, and really what we can pull from this text, we kind of have one person specifically called out by name because why? Because he was welcoming. Like Paul remembers him. Paul was encouraged by him. And like if you remember Paul's relation to Timothy, he calls him his son. So he's kind of relating to him advice like you would your kids. I mean, that's a little bit what Second Timothy is. It's this encouragement to this guy who's been mentored by him and who he kind of treats and views as his son. And so in the same way that we basically advise and encourage and challenge and motivate our kids, we can kind of follow Paul's example here because he's telling Timothy about this person who was hospitable. And it kind of makes me think of two specific details. All right. The first is that we need to be like Onesiphorus. We need to be welcoming to others. We need to have people in our life that we're willing to reach out to. And this includes people maybe like Paul, who are ministering and who are missionaries, who are serving the Lord, or it could be someone that doesn't know the Lord. I don't think it necessarily matters who. I think we should be pulling and having conversations and welcoming all types of individuals into our home. Like I want my kids to remember as they were growing up that like my parents were constantly welcoming people into our house, where they got to see us firsthand love on other people. Because when someone comes into your house, you're serving them. They don't know where anything is. You're giving them everything that they need for a meal or any kind of game or activity, or it's anything. You're providing all of that out of your love and out of your abundance. And for us, I know what our kids get to see is they get to see that interaction, but it goes way beyond that because they get to see the preparation and the aftermath. Like anytime someone comes over, what do? You clean the house, you organize, and we tell them, like, listen, it's not for us. It's not so that people can have a good impression of our house. It's not so that they can lift us up in their mind. And no. It's simply we want people to feel welcome. Like we clean this area so that people can come in and not be distracted by a mess. That we can actually engage in real conversation. And then what happens after? We're cleaning up. We're organizing and so for us, our kids are seeing that whole process, they're seeing what goes into it and what comes out of that whole time that we're welcoming people into our home. And I want that to stick in their mind. The other thing that maybe we can pull, the other detail from this text is, Paul is telling Timothy, so his son, about the hospitality of someone in his life. And it makes me wonder, like, am I doing that? Am I telling people in my life about those who are, doing kind things for me
continually. Those people who are really making a difference. Because listen, Paul didn't have to mention this guy. He didn't have to mention him at all, but he did. And he did because he was significant enough for him in his life. And I think it's a pattern that we can follow. But I'm gonna I'm I'm gonna brag on someone else right now. I'm gonna tell my family about someone who has treated me well, who is just doing kind things for me, even if it was just one kind thing. And for some of you, maybe that needs to start with your spouse. I think that sometimes we can get into the habit of coming home and just kind of spewing out all the things that frustrated us during the day, because those things kind of build up, right? We can't attack and go off on our boss or even like our coworkers, but we can't really discuss and because that's not good either. And so it's good that we can have our spouse to kind of be that sounding board, but I think there needs to be a balance there where we're talking about like all the things that people did for us that were kind and generous. And because I think our kids are overhearing some of those conversations. They do in our house. Our kids are kind of overseeing that, and as they get older, they've been just come more observant of what we're saying. And we want to make sure that we're even in the context of our house lifting people up continually. And so those are kind of just two things that really jumped out to me in just this short section here. There's not really much more to unpack. But before I sign off, I want to begin talking through the principles of parenting in the book that we're going to go through by Paul Tripp. And what we're going to do each week is basically just kind of just really, really briefly discuss just something that maybe Brett and I were challenged with in that particular chapter. And really because what the motivation is that we hope that you will go through it on your own, because we're just kind of treating it as like hey, let's learn together, because we're not experts either, and we're kind of figuring out parenting as we go along as well, and then parenting each child is even different, and so we're kind of navigating that as well. And so let's just start really briefly with the introduction, because what he does is he defines two different terms for parenting. And I think that we can probably identify different moments when we're being these types of parents. And the first is ownership parenting. The second is ambassadorial parenting. That's hard to say. Let me define those. Okay, so ownership parenting, what it is this is the kind that's motivated and shaped by what parents want for their children and from their children. So that's the motivation, and there's some negative connotations there, and if we're honest, it's kind of a battle that's always there in parenting that we need to constantly push back against, because I don't think it's what God would expect of us and desire us to be as parents. On the other hand, ambassadorial parenting, it's not thinking about what we want for or from our children, but instead what God can do through us in our children. And so when it comes to parenting and really in all areas of life, here's what constantly needs to go through our mind. Is this about my will or about God's will? It's just the question that kind of jumped out to me in the introduction as we're preparing to read through this text together. And so I hope that you join us. We're learning as well. Like I said, Brett and I are not an expert. We're figuring it all out. Anyone who's saying that they have parenting figured out is a liar. So I'm really excited to learn and apply these gospel principles to my family. And so next week we'll do a quick snapshot of chapter 1, something that maybe convicted us or is teaching us, and hopefully it'll motivate you to read through the book as well. So next week, what we'll do is a quick review of chapter 1. Hopefully we'll get Brett back on the mic. And so we will see you then. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Through the Forest. We hope it was a blessing to you. We'd be really grateful if you'd like to subscribe to our channel, and if you know someone who would be encouraged by this episode, please pass it along. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.